Hello, everyone. This is Eric Pennington, and welcome to the Spirit of EQ podcast. We're glad that you've tuned in. A few things we wanted to tell you at the beginning of the show, and that's this podcast was created to be a tool to help you, primarily to discover and grow your EQ. Science and our own lived experiences confirm that the better we are at managing our emotions, the better we're going to be at making decisions, which leads to a better life. And that's something we all want. We're glad that you've taken out the time today to listen and hope that something that you hear will lead to a breakthrough. Hey, one last thing. We'd really appreciate a review on whichever platform you use to listen. And if you want to, leave some comments about what you heard today, as well as follow and subscribe. That way you won't miss a single episode as we continue this journey. And with that, the show begins. All right, Jeff. The title of this episode really threw me for a loop. And it's not because it's not clever. It's just when you told me, because we were in a meeting prior to recording, and you said, "Not my monkeys" is going to be the episode I want to. And I immediately thought, what do monkeys have to do with EQ and personal growth or whatever? So now that I know exactly where you're going, I gotta start by giving you. I'm going to retell for you a nightmare I had, because I've been one of these people who, in my past, where I always felt like I needed to be Superman. You know, if you needed to be saved, just call me. I'll fly in and save the day. And I couldn't say no. So I had this nightmare that I was walking at the top level of a house, was looking out a window, and I could see a line of people out to the street leading up to my front door. And in the nightmare, I'm not like registering, why are they all here? So I go downstairs and I go to the front door to open it and ask the first person, and it was they had some issue, some argument, some drama that they were experiencing, and they wanted my attention and my input and my activity. And I remember in this, it was, okay, so what are the rest of these people here for? And this person said, well, they're here for the same thing. And I remember that feeling of, oh my gosh, dread and anxiousness going, I can't manage all this for these people. I don't know if it meant anything, but when you were telling me about this episode and where you wanted to go, I'm thinking about, wow, that kind of communicates to me about what happens when you pay no attention to what bandwidth you have and what you should be involved in. And just because you're experiencing the drama doesn't mean that I'm supposed to experience the drama. So why don't you open it up a little bit for everyone?
It's just from an old expression, not my circus, not my monkeys.
Ah, right.
Okay, it's the idea of it's not my problem. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have empathy for you or care about your problem, but it's not my problem. Either it doesn't affect me or I can't fix it. And figuring out what is this something I need to be involved in, or is this something that's just going to suck that bandwidth up? It's funny because before the meeting, we were talking about Wi-Fi problems.
Right.
And you can suck up all that bandwidth and nothing works.
Yeah.
You've exhausted it. You can't do anything else. And
so I want to make sure that I also heard you, because I kind of come at this also from the perspective of, and I think I heard you say this in this way, and correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm willing to help you. If you need a helping hand.
Right.
But I cannot own your issue or your problem or your drama. Is that, am I?
Yeah. And then also have the, we talk about consequential thinking and things like that. Have the understanding as, I really, I feel empathy for your situation, but I just can't help you.
Would that be like, for example, in someone who maybe needs clinical help for an issue? that maybe they're looking to you to maybe be that person that can help them solve it. And again, I understand, Jeff. I mean, you can have that cup of coffee with that person and listen. But I think if at some point early on, if they're looking for you to offer somewhat of a clinical, some type of clinical advice, you do have to have the courage to say, I'm not equipped to do that, right?
It could be a situation like that. It could be getting drawn into personal battles between two people.
Ah, yeah, you mean kind of like the husband and wife, or the spouse and the partners and all that other stuff where
or the people at your work.
Yeah.
Where it's, you come up to me and I can't, this person is making me so angry and blah, blah, blah. I don't want any of that. I am not in that fight, so take your monkey and go someplace else.
Right. And that I know for some that sounds like, oh, that's awfully harsh, Jeff. And I don't think you're advocating that everything has to be said that way, but I think ultimately the message, the underlying message is, okay, if your problem is with Jeff, the best thing you can do is track Jeff down, call Jeff up, send Jeff a text, and you two need to be talking about it.
Right. I don't need to be involved in this. It's just, I have my own things. And
you know what, Jeff? I think there's also another reason why, because if you jump in and get involved, you're robbing that person of the opportunity to work through something that is truly theirs.
Yeah, because they know, okay, I know I can go over to Jeff and he's going to agree with me and he's going to help me fuel my whatever.
Right. And I totally understand that, because there have been times in my life where I've been either afraid, reluctant, whatever, to confront the other person. And I felt better if I could talk to this friend and feel like maybe they told me, well, maybe, why don't we meet again and we can talk about maybe some ways. And I felt better because I didn't have to, then it kind of relieved me of the fear that I had of actually, when in reality, maybe the best advice would be you need to have a conversation with them.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, like I said, like you said, just don't cut them off.
Right.
You don't be rude or anything. Like sometimes you might have to, but
elevation.
But
right.
no, you want to guide them away from what they're getting, what they think they'll get from you, to what they really need. So it could be anything like that. It could be gossip about what's they're going to lay off 50 people. And,
well, I'm sorry I'm cutting you off, but that was the thing I failed to mention, is that what you were describing earlier there about somebody coming to you about someone else, that typically is the pathway for gossip.
Right. So so that gossip is what is it? It's in Peter or James, I forget, where they talk about
the power of the tongue.
Yes.
Right. And how it can set a forest afire, and I forget the other part.
Then the feather that blows away, and you're never going to get it back.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a whole nother episode sometime.
Yeah.
See, we get ourselves sidetracked, folks. So.
All right. So, Jeff, I'm going to pivot to a list of things that might be helpful, and maybe how we can navigate this idea that, hey, it's your monkey, not mine, right? All right. So we touched a little bit about people. That's probably the biggest one, right?
Yeah, I think so, because it's the person, that you're next to that is right there with you.
Right. And I think this is a helpful exercise for our audience. And I learned this in a mental health first aid. I think that's how it went. And basically being able to sort of triage and help people on a very high level who may be dealing with some things around mental health. But in this exercise, they had us, for illustration purposes, on a piece of paper, they had like all these circles that were around one another. So it was almost layers, a circle on the inside, then one outside of that, and one outside of that, one outside of that. And what you were to do is to write the initials of those who belonged in the very center circle.
Okay.
And then those on the outer. I mean, ideally, those in the inner circle are the absolutely most important people. You could count on them. You could call them up at 2 a.m. and say, "Hey, I've been sick and I don't have a car. Will you come and pick me up and take me to the emergency room?" And you wouldn't think twice about it because you're in that circle.
Right.
Next out of circle, maybe more like friends, neighbors, probably if you called them at 2 a.m, they're probably going to say, "Well, have you called 911? And do you have a friend?" I mean,
they're the ones that would take you to the airport.
Yeah, potentially, right? Those kind of deals. And what the exercise is designed to do was 2 things. One, you need to have a lot of key people, or the right people in that inner circle.
I think that's important. The right people in that inner circle.
Yeah, it's not many, it's the right. So the right people. And then it was also to help you understand that many people don't. Many people would have a struggle to identify who is there, right? So where I'm going with that is that if that is sort of the lens, it would help us to understand where our place is in the particular situation, right?
Right.
If it's somebody who's 3 circles out, it might be hey, I don't know what to tell you. Have you thought about maybe talking to a psychologist? Or, hey, I don't know what to help you. Maybe your teenage son would be willing to, maybe go on a, dad and son trip. It's going to be very vague and it's going to be high level.
And not personally involved.
But if it's your spouse, if it's your brother, if whoever it is that you've the right people in that circle, when they come to you with the drama, that one is you're really going to inject and be involved in. And I want to please make sure that everyone understands. It does not mean that if you are in the inner circle that you're going to reward bad behavior.
Right.
That you're going to enable. There's so many people that I know, Jeff, where the relationship that they're dealing with is robbing them. And they're unwilling to do anything about it because in their head, that's my brother, that's my son, that's my, my best friend from 20 years.
Yeah. And with what we're talking about, I use that "it's not my monkey" thing kind of as a funny thing, but
right.
You're talking about the same thing, even with those people close to you. The "not my monkey" thing means I don't know how to handle this. I'm not a monkey expert in this case, what we're talking about, but I'll stand by you, but I'm not the one that can fix this.
Yeah. Because it also, I think with people, it becomes important that we understand the dynamic of connection, right? And one of the things in my mind that can break connection is when you have one person is not taking responsibility for their behaviors, choices, and the other person is being pulled in to go along and to manage it with them, so for someone who, I know we kind of joked, about the absolute statement of "not mine, you're out," whatever.
Yeah.
So what would you say to those who say, well, so what are some recommendations? How do I say to the person, your monkey is not, how does that go again, the saying?
Just
your monkey, not my circus?
It's not my circus, not my monkey.
Right. Okay. So how do you say that in a way, do you think, Jeff, that maybe leaves the person potentially, and I want to underline potentially, because you can't be responsible for the reactions, responses, and whatever, and say it in a way that might be respectful and kind?
You have to do it with empathy for yourself and especially for the other person, and say, I totally understand. I can feel what you're feeling. I understand, I'm taking what you're saying, what you're sharing with me very seriously, but I have to be totally honest with you. This is not something that I have the skills to help you with. I'll stand by you. I'll do anything that you ask me to do to help you, but I'm not the one that can get you where you need to be. And say it that way.
Yeah.
You're still offering yourself in this relationship to be able to stand by the person. I had, we've talked about my anxiety stuff. I had people that stood by me, but luckily those people knew they weren't the ones that could fix the situation. So that's what I think is like when you're dealing with people, you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to discount their problem. You want to acknowledge it. You want to acknowledge that this does not make them a lesser person.
Right.
But I'm just not the person that can do this. You need to do this, or you need to do that.
Right.
Talk to someone, like you said. You need, with my help, you need to take the situation over.
Yeah. It's been worn out in our culture, this idea of personal responsibility. I think it got hijacked by the Republican Party some years ago, which, like, cue the eye roll. So show how much I think of the politicians. So one of the things that is very powerful about personal responsibility, that it is a very, it's a very important thing, because at the end of the day, the choices that I make are going to produce the life I'm living.
Right.
For the most part. And I don't know about you, Jeff, but I think that that's something that I don't want to share with 3, 4, 5, 7 people. I don't want to share it with another human being. And I mean it in this way. I've got to live with the results of my choices. Now, and I get it in cases like mine where I'm married. There is an extension to that. I do have to be aware. I don't make my choices in a vacuum. But at the end of the day, if my wife were sitting here, she would say, he's responsible to do what only he can be responsible for. So to me, that's the healthier view of personal responsibility.
Right.
Is recognizing that. Again, that is not negating or taking away a loved one's offer of help, a loved one's offer of support. What we're talking about is that if that loved one says, well, why don't you let me know? This is something that is mine. It is my responsibility to work through. Support me. And maybe that support is in prayer. Maybe that support is, I have a dear friend who is a psychologist.
Or that support could be, I understand you're going through this. I understand that right now you're not going to be behaving normally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. All right. Or one of my favorites, it kind of comes back to about empathy, is I'll sit and listen. If you need someone to listen to where you're at, I'll sit and listen. And that's a very supportive way.
I mean, that's one of the most important things we can do for someone.
Well, and I think, Jeff, we've talked about it before, absent of that, you can't really offer empathy. Because if I don't know your story, if I don't understand, like, you're making it clear to me, like, it's point A, it's point B, it's point C, until you lay that out for me, I can't know. Because my biases might say, well, no, it's not point A, point B, point C. It's probably, you could get rid of A and just use B, C. Whoa, wait a minute. How do you know that? How do you know that?
That's not our place as the listener.
Yeah, exactly. So I think those are some powerful ways in which, when it comes to how do we communicate that this is yours, right, to the other person. All right, so the wonderful land of social media. Thoughts on that?
I'm not saying leave it. It's probably best if we all did, but that's not the world we live in right now. Right. But pay attention to what you're getting involved in social media. Somebody starts a Twitter feed or whatever. I don't do Twitter, or Facebook, whatever. Do you need to say anything and make a comment? Do is what they're talking about something that really concerns you, or is it just, I think about it, I'm going to get mad, rather than something that really concerns you? And once again, that takes some, some self-reflection or whatever. Is this something that's really important to me, or am I just doing it because everybody else is? Or if I know I say this, somebody will say that, and then that's kind of stuff. So, once again, if it's something that's really important to you, fine. You're invested in it. But if it's not, don't.
The other thing, Jeff, that I think about social media is a little more insidious in nature, and it's the voice in our own heads as we scroll through story after story, photograph after photograph. And I just had this happen during the time of this recording. There are many graduations going on, right? And I'm of the age where the graduations relate to college more than they do to high school. And my son, who is going to be a senior in college this coming fall, I guess, graduates 2024, right? He's got some of his friends that are graduating now. Some of them are doing advanced type stuff. I graduated early and I'm moving into my master's program.
Right.
And of course, as social media does, it gives the air of, look at me. Look at what I'm doing. Look at what I'm accomplishing. And maybe an implied, well, how are you doing? Not so much the how are you doing, like I really care about how you're doing, but like, how are you doing compared to me?
Yes.
Right? And don't get me wrong, Jeff, I'm not saying that every post that I'm referencing to you now was the old humble brag thing.
Right.
Right? But I noticed how my son was having his response to in conversation over dinner. And he didn't give well, I'm nothing and I'm a failure and I'm not this and that. But I could get a little tinge of, like him doing some self-examination. Like, well, how do I rate, right? And I've tried this, and I've done this, I should say, for many years, even when he was much younger, is to always kind of reinforce, you got to run your race. You're one of one. Don't listen to the herd. Just let it pass you on by. And I get it, Jeff. I feel it. I'm human, on and on. But to me, when that comes up, it's like, you got to keep moving here. You just got to keep moving. You got to run your race, and I'm hoping that it has placed him in a position of where he will begin to go, that's your story. That's your path. And your path is yours. My path is mine. And I think to some degree, maybe that helps him a bit to go, I'm responsible for me. I'm responsible for the decisions I'm going to make, the school I'm going to go to, the event. Maybe I'm going to get an advanced degree. Maybe I'm not.
He's worrying about his monkey.
Exactly. Because I think that ultimately that's kind of the underlying message here. You've got your monkey. I got mine.
Yes, and I have enough to do chasing mine around. I don't want to chase yours.
Yeah. So as we look at organizations.
Okay, I've got a true experience years ago.
Yep.
Member of the church. I was on the trustees, so all that stuff.
Yep.
Sang in the choir. Somebody donated a good chunk of change, and it was designated to get new choir robes, new hymnals, and new carpet in the sanctuary. And none of those things mattered to me. It's nice to get the new stuff. I maybe like this color scheme a little bit better than that, but it didn't matter. But I was constantly trying to be brought into one faction or the other. And, to me, I didn't care. And it was some heated meetings. You'd think a church would handle it better, but churches are usually the worst ones to handle this kind of stuff.
Right.
But yeah, don't get caught up in that stuff. The color of the hymnals and the robes and stuff is not going to affect the message that you're trying to convey.
And I would dare say, Jeff, I don't know if you would agree or not. I find that if you get a scent, if you're sniffing that's where the organization is going, early is better than later, and making it very clear hey, this is where I'm looking at it from the lens of and I would, again, I'm not putting words in your mouth or for anyone else out there who may be, but if it were me, it was like, if we're going to have meetings to debate on the color of a carpet, I'm just not going to be here. And we're talking about volunteers. We're talking about, I get it. If this was your employer, there's a different way of addressing it. And I'm more than happy to do that, Jeff. But I think in cases of like what you described, where it's a volunteer situation, if you know, in most any situation, regardless of the organization, the earlier you can communicate, like, hold on, the better off you're going to be. Because if you wait on that one, I mean, it'll start to take on a life of its own, and you'll find yourself, man, you're in tangles.
And I had to set a boundary of, I am not getting involved in this. And it's, and it can be, and sometimes, for a little church, that was a big thing. Another organization I was with, some people didn't stack the chairs right in the multi-purpose room. It's like,
So, can I throw in the business? I know that's one of the ones we were going to talk about too, because I have a story, and you just used the word, and we didn't really talk about it, but boundaries.
Right.
I think that is a very important thing. If you haven't developed boundaries in virtually all facets of your life, I recommend you do, because it will keep you accountable to you and your health, versus allowing others to pull you in to thinking that, again, their monkeys are yours. So here's the story. So a friend of mine starts a position, and it's a great opportunity. And, the interview is like the first date. On the first date, your clothes are absolutely pressed. Your shoes are shined. You've cleaned up well, and you love everything about the other person, right? And of course, it's after marriage or after getting serious, the person lets down their guard, and then you start to find out who they really are. So,
if that was the case, none of us would ever get married,
right? So, here's what's interesting to me was that the manager, in the interview, oh no, we don't micromanage. That's definitely no. We want you to feel empowered and blah 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 blah. Turns out he's a micromanager, and what was even worse is that he would like randomness. I mean, it could be like Saturday afternoon at 2:30, a text message. Hey, I need you to give me X, Y, and Z. Sunday morning at 10. Did you see that report? And we need to make sure that we're ready to talk about this on Monday. And it was just like, oh my gosh, right? So they asked my opinion, just, hey, what do you think? I mean, because my manager, and I said, I know it's going to sound tough, and it might take some courage, but you're going to need to have a conversation about boundaries, right? I mean, you may have to reference back to the interview process when it was made very clear that there was not micromanaging. You may have to reference that you were empowering, right? And say, well, in order to empower me, that means to let me do this job. And at the point in time, if I'm flailing, if I'm not able to meet standards, well, of course, I expect you probably are going to micro me a bit. You are going to tighten it. But you know what he found out? This particular person was just very unorganized and expected them to accommodate how disorganized they were. And for them, what's the difference if I text you on Sunday morning or a Saturday afternoon? I got to get this work done. Now, this person made it very clear, it's not my job to go tell my manager, you're just unorganized. And you should maybe take a class or something on time management or something. But they did have to have that conversation about boundaries. And yeah, it was tough. And you know what, Jeff? He didn't like it. He didn't like having that conversation. And I kind of pre-warn them that might be part of it. It might be like, ouch, you might be poking a bit. But better that than you're in year number 2, you're on vacation, and you're having the greatest time of your life on the beach with your family, and your phone goes off, and you pick it up because it's him. And now you're in a place where I got to respond. I got to. When in the reality was, it's his monkey. And the reality is, you didn't set a boundary.
Right.
So I mean, I didn't really labor on when you were talking about it earlier about the boundary thing, but do you see that as an important facet of managing this process?
Yeah, no, I think that's what this is really, all of it is based on, is you have to set a clear boundary.
Mm-hmm. Because I know you kind of alluded to that in the beginning, and we didn't use the term.
Yeah.
But by sitting down and saying, I can't, I'm not equipped, I'm not the right person, that is a form of setting a boundary, right?
Yeah, and the boundary needs to be properly permeable or something. I can't think of the right way to say it. You need to have some, that boundary needs to be able to be communicated. It also needs to be able to be communicated through, so that, it's a Sunday morning and you get the text from your boss. You set the boundary, don't bother me on Sunday morning. So the plant's on fire. I need you here now.
Yeah, right, okay, exactly.
So that boundary needs to be understood, what can cross through it and what can't.
Yeah, and that's a great point. You have to be able to articulate that a text message on Sunday morning is emergency. We all hands on deck. Everybody has to pitch in. We didn't see this coming. Or maybe it's like, hey, this client moved the meeting from Thursday to tomorrow morning at 9.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just confirm that you have enough time to get what you need in place?
Yeah, that's
different.
Yeah, that's completely different.
But to use Sunday morning at 10 a.m. to go, hey, did you see that email I sent you on the second quarter profit and loss? Sorry, no.
Yeah, so learning to set those kind of boundaries in that situation. Once again, the boss you were describing, his lack of planning is not my emergency.
And that's why I brought it up, Jeff, because it is kind of that whole idea about the monkey thing, And again, you could say, well, what if he doesn't stop, and what if the manager, regardless of the situation, is unwilling to? I'm not here to like say, hey, how do you fix your organization and a manager within that organization? I just know that if you don't, that's going to be a lot worse than if you tackle it on the front side.
It's it's like a fireman. When they're on duty, they're on duty.
Yeah.
When they're not on duty, there's no fire alarm going off in their house.
Right. Well, and we can go back to some of our previous episodes when we talked about building resources, right? The time to address a carbon monoxide problem is when you're at Lowe's and you're buying a carbon monoxide warning device. That's when you have started to deal with carbon monoxide.
Right.
The time to be dealing with it is not when you're feeling like I'm going to pass out and I'm nauseous and I can call 911. I mean, I'm using an extreme here.
Well, from personal experience, that's not fun.
Okay. So, I mean, that's all we're saying here. The messaging is not about, okay, fill in the blank boilerplate. This is what you do. It's kind of that idea, once again, back to it's those setting of boundaries. It's about what is your responsibility, what is theirs. And just because someone has a title does not mean it's a title. It does not mean that because you are the senior X, Y, and Z that you actually are that good. And that's not me taking a shot, Jeff. I'm just saying, if you are able, and I'm going to segue here about how we can use EQ to do this, because this is a big part about communication, right? I mean, in our heads, we may know clearly this is not my responsibility, right? With talking with friends about what I should do, it's clear. But when you and I have got to sit down and I got to say, hey, I need to talk to you about something.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it's tough. So with that, what are some maybe competencies, maybe approaches, strategies that people could use in using EQ to help communicate that, hey, this is not mine, this is yours.
I think, well, one is our first one, pay attention to what you're feeling. Why am I feeling mad about this or upset or whatever? Explore that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I am feeling discomfort because this is not my issue, or I'm feeling discomfort because this is a difficult issue that I am going to be needing to evolve in. That discomfort goes different ways. One is stay away.
Yeah.
One is you're going to have to, but it's okay that you feel that way. And then recognizing patterns.
Can I go back to paying attention? That's one of the biggest, I think, out there. Yeah, maybe I'm going to say it differently. I think it's one of the biggest strategies you can employ to help you navigate this thing as you prepare for a tough conversation. Because, as you know, Jeff, emotions are data. And they can give you a lot of good data about what's behind this. What's the motivation? Why are you feeling upset? Why are you feeling frustrated? That prepares you to be able to go in with a clearer head when you are having the tough conversation, because you know what's behind it. You're literate about the emotion.
Yeah,
right?
I feel discomfort with this, Eric, because I'm not the one equipped to help you.
Right. And which you might continue on to say, and if I try to help you, I feel like I'm going to make your problem even worse, which is going to potentially damage our relationship.
Exactly. So Eric, I feel some discomfort with this. I know I can be involved with you, but that's two different. Once again, understanding what the emotion is telling you.
Yeah. So you mentioned recognize patterns. Can you open that one up a little bit more?
I think that one's pretty simple. Just, okay, when this person does this, I always do that. And when I always do that, am I getting the result that I want?
Yeah.
That's pretty simple if that way. I think consequential thinking plays a part in this to be able to understand what the consequences are of, always babysitting the other person's monkey when you shouldn't be. What are the consequences of that? Well, my monkey got loose and is terrorizing the neighborhood because I was, whatever it is.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out too, this, the idea of empathy. And this comes in the form of listening to a person's story, and managing your own biases, because we have them. There's some things, Jeff, that I'm going to recommend that you may feel that's absolutely nuts. There's no way. But are you willing to let me tell you everything? Are you willing to believe that that's where Eric is at? Because without doing that, you're probably not going to provide a ton of empathy. Because again, you've already decided maybe after 2 sentences that I don't think this is right. I don't think this is good. I think on and on and on.
You've judged.
You've judged, ultimately. Yeah, you've judged. And I think where it also goes is that once you, I think, arrive to that point where you can provide empathy, I think validation is one of the strongest ways to begin a tough conversation. Expressing what you feel about the other person or how you feel about the other person in a positive, right? Validating that this person's life matters, that their journey matters. Good decisions, bad decisions, they're enough. And you see that. And then moving to, here's what I wanted to talk to you about. What I have found, just my lived experience, right, is that when I validate, I position that person to take from me that difficult bit of information, and it leaves our connection in a healthy place.
And that validation needs to be sincere.
Oh,
It's
without
like,
doubt.
well, Eric, I like your glasses, but
Right. And I would dare say, I'm not. This is not, again, we're not prescribing out there. Making validation and then inserting but after might give an air of, I really just threw out that flowery statement because I thought I was supposed to. I want to make it easier on me so that I can have this conversation, get it over with.
you might want to say say a validation. Eric, I really whatever, and then say, now let me understand.
Mm-hmm. Could be that. Yeah.
Something like that, that you said that, now you're letting the person be involved in the situation.
Right. Right. And, you, again, as we're throwing out these various strategies, because this is what they are. These are not prescriptions.
Right.
You're going to have to find your own right cadence and right delivery. It could be, hey, you asked me for my help with this issue you're having, and fill in the blank of what the issue may be. If you knew once you've been asked previously to help, it's something that you can't do, you don't have the bandwidth, then it's got to be, Jeff, I feel like what you're asking me to do to help you is beyond my ability. I would love to help you, but I would really harm our relationship if I just pretended that I could, and then in 3 months maybe you discover that it's just getting worse. I don't want to contribute to worse.
Right.
I want to contribute to, in our relationship, connection. Again, if I validate it and then I went to that, and I want to be very, very clear, Jeff, and I know you know this, our audience, the other person might turn on you. They may get angry as a hornet. They may exclaim how bad, how rude, how uncaring you, all of that.
Right.
So this is not silver bullet stuff that if you say this and if you do this, then they will do. I get it.
That's consequential thinking.
Right. It can and has, and in my experience, I mean, I followed everything we've been talking about, and it did not go well.
That's where the empathy comes in. If somebody does that with you, you still have to have empathy for them. They were looking at you, looking at me for something that you can't give. I understand why they're upset, and I'm just going to have to let that happen.
Yeah, and for me, and this personally, I want to be able to walk away from that situation, that interaction, and feel that I did what I could do. I did what I was responsible for. I'm not responsible for your anger at me because you didn't like what I said. I'm not responsible for you thinking I'm uncaring. I'm not responsible for you thinking that I've failed you. That's your responsibility. That's your responsibility to examine, well, why do I feel like Eric failed me? Why do I feel like he's betraying me? What's behind that? What did he say that expresses betrayal? Now, again, this person might be just riding on the reaction to the emotion in the moment, and they can't see that. But again, and this is hard. This is really hard work. I'm responsible for me, and Jeff, you are responsible for you.
Exactly.
And that's really kind of the bottom line of it all.
My monkey's mine, your monkey's yours.
Yeah. With that, thank you everyone for tuning in. We look forward to the next time we're together.